IVM.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of This Round is on Me. So I thought I'd start with giving a bit of an update on what's been happening in my week, business wise. And it's actually been a great start to the week because we were finally allowed to reopen our restaurant. And, so we actually opened on Monday just for lunch service, but that's still better than nothing. And it was such a great feeling to see so many people coming in on our first day of service. And just to be able to, do the dine in, the hospitality, be able to sort of share our love of food and drinks with people in person, really can't beat that feeling. The noise of chatter and just it being a buzzy vibe, really, really incredible feeling, never taking that for granted again. And yeah, and I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's going out to restaurants, not just to ours, but to restaurants at large. It really means a lot to me, and I'm sure to our entire fraternity right now. So of course, please come out in at your own pace when you feel comfortable. But for those of you already going out, a big, big, hearty thank you. So it's actually been a bit of an eventful week, not just for the restaurant reopening, but also, we actually parted ways with one of our chefs for one of our brands. And there was a lot of learning that came from this. And I just wanted to sort of share how I've been feeling. So in our business, and I think in, many industries, sort of, I'm sure this is the same, that there's a very strong obviously creative side, but then there needs to be an equally strong business side. And the two really are equally important and required for any business to be successful, at least as far as our industry is concerned. And you know what really, I mean, this isn't just something that I've figured out in the last week, but really something that I've learned in all my years of being in this business. And I just thought it'd be interesting to share. Um, what really makes that work is when both parties or both sides of that sort of equation feel that they respect what the other side brings, they see value in it, and they don't feel like one is more important than the other. And I think until that sort of trust, respect, and that understanding is on the same wavelengths, it's really hard to make that marriage work. And that's something that we've seen on and off over the years. And I think went through something similar again recently. And so yeah, I just wanted to share that this is something that really keep in mind, whatever your business is. And also we for me, things don't always go to plan, right? Like you are going to be faced with situations that might be slightly unpleasant or evoke sort of an emotional response. And yet again, I realized that the best thing to do is just sleep on it. And that's exactly what I did to something that I felt was a little unpleasant, but I decided to sleep on it. And the next day, my entire thought process was just so much more rational and practical and not jaded by an emotional sort of side, and it just made me think so much more clearly. And yeah, I just I decided that instead of thinking like the day before that, oh, I need to like consult with people about what I should do, and actually the answers were right there with me, and I just realized that the best thing I can do is learn from this and move on, and not necessarily feel the need to defend myself to everyone and explain myself and justify my actions, because it wasn't really going to in any way help me with my sort of future plans and going forward. And that realization was so important to me to be able to just focus on what I needed to get done and move ahead. So yeah, I just thought I'd share a little bit of a learning, and I hope you guys have a great week ahead too. So we're going to take a quick break now before I introduce my guest for the week, and I'm really excited about this one. So please stay tuned.
Whether you're an established sports person or a budding one or simply a sports enthusiast, join us, Tanvi and Shlok.
We are two passionate pro badminton players talking policy, mindset and everything sport.
So tune in to the Millennial Athlete every Monday.
Only on the IVM Podcast Network.
Trust us, it's gonna be lit.
Welcome to today's episode of This Round is on Me. It's March 2020. My nephew has just found out that he's got into Swarthmore, the college of his choice in the US. He's in the middle of his IB mock exams, and the pandemic hits. The good news, no more final exams. The bad news, freshman year just went virtual. Disaster. Or was it? In a clear case of nepotism, I've invited my nephew Chaitanya Motwane on as a guest to find out how exactly he spent the next 1 year and if there's anything we could all learn from him. Chet, welcome to the show.
Hi, Gauri Masi. Really excited to be here.
So, Chet, I remember having this conversation with you in the summer of 2020 about whether you should defer starting college by a year. And it seemed like a no-brainer to me, frankly, because I remember when I went to college in the UK, it was really common for students to take a year off between high school and uni. And it wasn't just a year about faffing. You know, there were actual structured gap year programs that students could sign up for, whether it involved teaching English as a foreign language or working in an NGO or just spending time traveling, etc. So, when you realized that freshman year just possibly went virtual, what did you finally decide and how did you come to that decision?
Right. So once the pandemic hit, we went into lockdown, and after a couple of months of lockdown, I was faced with the decision of whether I wanted to start college virtually or take a semester off. So what my college had done is they had told me that the first semester, which was until December, was definitely going to be online. And then we would wait and see what's going to happen with the second semester based on the situation. So what I did was that I deferred my enrollment for the first semester. And then I told myself that, if it's going to be online for the second semester, maybe we can take a call then. Maybe we can decide whether based on what they tell us.
Right.
But so I deferred the first semester, and what happened was that after just 1 or 2 months of me being in my gap semester, I was just like, you know what, regardless of what Swarthmore says regarding the second semester, I'm definitely going to defer that as well and take this year off, because I just realized the amount of potential this year had to just be something amazing in my life.
But, your situation was in the middle of a pandemic. So did you just get yourself the golden ticket to stay home, wake up late, order in, and just watch copious amounts of TV all day?
So actually, honestly, that's exactly what I've been doing for during the lockdown, like during the first half of 2020. And honestly, it's what I've been doing in the first 1 or 2 months of the gap year as well. But I think at some point I was just like, you know what, if you've taken this gap year, there's no way you're going to let yourself just like screw around and watch TV. And but yeah, I think at maybe a month or two in, I kind of decided that I really need to figure out a plan for this year. And that's when I kind of got thinking as to how exactly I could spend this year and what I could be doing.
Right. So, it kind of sounds like you wanted to make the best of a bad situation, which, for me really is lesson number one. And, it's as simple as that it's also kind of how I've been thinking about our business for the last 1 year, where, you could really like throw your hands up in the air and be like, well, we're in lockdown. There's nothing really we can do. But, cliched as it may sound, we really did have to try and find that silver lining. And
yeah, definitely. I think COVID has brought that out in everyone, because everyone has had to figure out how to make the best of a bad situation. I didn't know what I was going to do with my year, but all I knew was that I definitely didn't want to do online college. So, right. And now I had the opportunity because of that to kind of make the most out of this 1 year that I've been,
So what happened next?
That I had. So exactly. So now I spoke to myself and I was like, okay, you have this year off, and what exactly are you going to do with it? And at first I was just like, it's an entire year. I spent my entire life completely planned for me at school, and then there's, classes or tuitions or whatever it is. I've had my entire life where my entire day has been planned for me. And here I have this whole year, which is just free, and I can do anything I want. So obviously that was scary, but right now I'm thinking, at that point I'm just thinking, okay, what can I do? So I kind of broke down my interests, my history, and kind of figured out what do I like, what do I really enjoy, what can I spend this year doing. So actually for the last 5 or 6 years, every summer I'd gone on some kind of adventure camp. And I loved every one of them. And I figured that, okay, that's a place to start, right? That's something that I really enjoy doing. I really like trekking or scuba diving or, river rafting or whatever it is. So I figured, maybe and I got in touch through my friends and family, and I was put in touch with one trekking and rafting agency. And so the first thing that I did was I went on a trek in the Himalayas to one of the most stunning places in the Himalayas, with one of my friends who had also chosen to take a gap year.
So, what were your other friends doing? Like you mentioned, you had a friend who joined you, but I'm sure, a bunch of your batchmates were in a similar situation. So what were some of the others doing?
Yeah, so a lot of my friends had the opportunity to go to college. A lot of them decided to take it on virtually. And a lot of them decided to a few of them decided to take that semester off, like me.
Right. And what were some of your other friends doing then during this semester off? Like, were other people kind of thinking along the same lines as you?
Yeah.
Or...
So I had this one friend who was kind of interested in the same things as me, but I had a couple of friends who decided to get an internship or, decided to kind of work with their family. They were given the opportunity for an internship, which they took. So What I had decided was that I felt like, this year, I really want to focus on myself and kind of bettering my knowledge and my experiences, either by, going and traveling or just by, reading books that I never would have normally read or just, studying. So I'm really interested in just generally in science and in math. And so I figured, if I have this whole year off, I can actually just kind of sharpen my brain in a way where it would be such a big head start for the next 4 years in college. And that's what I decided to do. So for me, it wasn't really, because I remember my mom telling me, why don't you teach the stuff that you love? Like, why don't you teach kids math, or why don't you, or through a virtual platform, or why don't you get a job or an internship? And it's not like she was forcing me to do those things. It's not like she was pushing me to do them. She was just giving me options. But I remember listening to myself, because I remember what I wanted to do was I just wanted to travel. I wanted to experience. I wanted to kind of better my own understanding of the subjects that I love as opposed to teach them, which I felt like at that point, like a year ago, that's definitely what my priority was. And I'm happy that I chose that.
For me, there's a lesson in there itself, and which is that don't follow the herd and follow your gut, because it sounds like there were a lot of the obvious things that you could have done, and you instead chose to really follow your heart and work on yourself, which is amazing. And from the sounds of it, you're obviously an adventure sport and outdoorsy kind of guy. Like you said, you've been doing that for several years, and that was the first thing that came to your mind when it came to the gap year as well. So, you went on this trip. What happened next?
So I went on this trip and I loved it. So I figured, this is definitely something that this year could be about. It could honestly just be about exploring and, trekking the mountains and traveling. And that definitely really appealed to me and to my friend as well. And so the next thing was kind of, figure out how I should spend the rest of the year. And there was this mountain triathlon, which was happening in December, called the Himalayan Adventure Challenge. And immediately I was like, you know what, that just sounds so interesting. So what that was is...
That just sounds so scary. I would never... I would never sign up for that. But anyway, sorry, go on.
So what that was, it was a 30-kilometer cycle in the hills, followed by a 21-kilometer hike, followed by a 14-kilometer raft down the Ganga. And so I'd been river rafting before. I'd actually never been mountain biking before, but I've always cycled and I've loved cycling. And of course, I love hiking. And I thought that would be so cool. And it's in the format of a race. So what they were saying was you have to get all your friends you can, create teams of 4, and then just go out there and race. So,
and did you manage to convince any of your friends?
Yeah. So actually, I just put the word out there to like everyone that I knew. And 7 of us decided to go to Rishikesh and kind of and take part in the Himalayan Adventure Challenge. And of the 7, some had taken gap years or gap semesters. Some had just finished their first semester of online college. Some had just come back from their college. So it was like definitely like a mix of, and kind of like a reunion after the first semester of college.
Nice. And you clearly lived to tell the tale. So
yeah,
that's
and
amazing.
It was awesome. That race was really cool. And so I remember at that point, I was like, you know what, the first trek was amazing. The Himalayan challenge was amazing. Why don't I plan a trip to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, because I've always loved scuba diving as well.
Right.
And that was the next thing for me. But before that, 2 of my friends and I actually decided to go to Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania and climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the tallest mountain in Africa.
That's quite a jump from trekking in the Himalayas. So how did that happen? I mean, how did you end up from Rishikesh to Tanzania?
Yeah, so actually a lot of the fellow trekkers in our Himalayan trek had a lot of experience with mountaineering and trekking, and they kind of said that, you know, if you guys are really into this and if you have the year off, this is a trek that you kind of have to do. And because when we were trekking in the Himalayas, we were just we weren't exactly climbing a mountain. We were just trekking through, through the trails, the mountains, the trails, exactly. So they said that this is like it's definitely a different experience when you're actually summiting something and when you reach that summit and then you come down the mountain. So they said they recommended this, and that's how it came up. And from there we just took that on and kind of started planning and preparing for that. But yeah, so what happened was that these 2 friends of mine who had also taken gap semesters and gap years, we were like, you know, this is something we have to do. And we decided to go with the same company that had taken us on the Himalayan trek as well as the mountain.
Oh, so they also do these overseas.
Yeah, they also
right.
do. So this is basically just a trekking company that does overseas as well as Himalayan treks as well as rafts in India. So so we planned it with them, but unfortunately, for various reasons, they weren't able to take us. So our whole Kili plan kind of got scrapped, and we were like really like, oh God, like now what do we do? You know, because we were like so into it. We'd been training for it. We kind of got some of the equipment. We were like totally preparing. And
but I mean, like, tell me, Chet, like just making a decision to climb Kili is not an easy thing, you know. I mean, I know I've spent a lot of my sort of youth trekking around India and Nepal, and it's something that, you know, you firstly convince your parents, you gotta, and it's not just something that like, oh, I feel like doing this today and let me just kind of show up there, right? So what was going on here? I mean, like, how did you all actually, and I know that often there's, you know, like people say like you really should do this and everyone gets really excited and you're like, yeah, I'm I really want to do it. But to actually do it and make it happen is a different thing. So
definitely.
How did that and hey, by the way, as a reminder, we were in the middle of a pandemic. So there's that little added factor, small added factor.
Definitely.
But, you know, how did you actually make this sort of loose conversation into a reality? I mean, actually take me through that before you even landed in.
Yeah. So no, for sure. You're totally right that it's not like something that we just kind of like decided to do and kind of did it. You know, there was a lot of training, a lot of preparation that went into it. So obviously the idea came up on our first trek in the Himalayas. And that's when that's when it presented itself as an option. You know, okay, you know what, maybe we can do this at some point in the future. And I guess at the start of 2021, we were just like, you know what, we have this second semester off. So what do you want to do? And I kind of thought to myself, okay, you know what, the Kili was an option earlier. Why don't we kind of explore that? And we found the trekking company, and obviously there was a lot to kind of that kind of went into it. We had to convince our parents who obviously they're not just going to want to send their 18 and 19-year-old kids to climb the tallest mountain in Africa. They may not even know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot that went into that. There was a lot that the whole pandemic situation, as you said, is it feasible to travel to Africa? What vaccinations do we need to get? Not just for COVID, but for other diseases. What is it, like a really technical, hard mountain to climb? What exactly does that entail? Are we prepared? Do we have enough experience in just trekking and in altitude to climb like Mount Kilimanjaro?
Right.
So there was a lot that went into that. But I feel like once we kind of got the basics, like the basic stuff out of it, like, can we travel in a pandemic? Yes. The only thing is this, or, kind of like explaining it in a very rational way to our parents. So once we kind of like got through that, I feel like it was just a matter of us making that decision and saying yes and kind of shutting out all these various, as you said, reasons not to go. And I feel like it was so much of the same decision. It was very similar to at the start of the year when there were 100 reasons for me not to take a gap year. There were various kind of voices saying, what are you going to do for a year? If you do nothing for a year, how are you going to get back into your education in college? Or you're going to be so lazy then? Why do you want to let go of your momentum? So obviously there were a lot of things that went into making any decision. But I feel like, and COVID has done this especially to everyone, is that at some point when you want to do something, you just have to shut out everything that, like every reason not to. And I think that I feel like I've used that philosophy in every single decision that I've made this year.
That's amazing. I mean, it sounds like, the crazier the idea, the easier it is to, just say, that sounds a little impossible, or that sounds like it's not really feasible right now.
That's
and
the
like
challenge.
you said,
Exactly.
And like you said, that there are so many reasons right now available to all of us to not do those things because, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's fear of, getting out or traveling or whatever. And I feel like, it's the sort of learning from what I'm hearing from you is that it's about saying yes more often than no within reason. But that within reason is the thing that sometimes is stretchable, right? Because
exactly, yeah. So that within reason is kind of, it varies from person to person, and it's all about kind of navigating through that within reason, through the reason. But I feel like at some level, if you can just take the challenge or just say yes, to anything, I feel like that's something that I've definitely learned this last year.
Yeah, and saying yes and then not caving in either, right? Because you say yes and then you hit, obviously everything isn't always going to be a smooth ride, and especially with what's going on right now, where you have like unexpected whatever, you have surprises, and again it's very easy to give up when these things happen. And
no doubt,
the real sort of
and again the pandemic right now has kind of brought that out in everyone. There are definitely going to be obstacles, the biggest one being the virus going around right now. But if you're able to navigate your way through that, if you're able to kind of achieve what you want, or even like do what you want, putting aside all the obstacles or kind of shutting them out, I feel like for me that's the biggest
outcome.
Lesson. Yeah, the biggest lesson in life.
Wow. And, okay, so you finally did manage to convince everyone, get everything sort of in order, and, then what happened?
So that was honestly the difficult part. But once we're in Tanzania, so Kilimanjaro, we spent around 8 days on the mountain. And the first 6 days were just getting to that base camp from which we take off and attempt the summit. But those first 6 days were obviously really long days. We trekked for around 5 to 6 hours per day at least. And it was very slow. So in fact, one of the kind of sayings in Swahili, which is the language in Tanzania, is this phrase called pole pole. So pole pole means slowly in Swahili. And that was, our Kilimanjaro philosophy. So that's kind of how we would trek every single day, slowly, one step at a time, so even on days where we had no idea where we were going, we had no idea how long it would take to get there. We would just be trekking, and our head guide would just be like, pole, guys, pole. And we'd just be like, oh God, how much longer? And, but yeah, so there's this one story actually of on the second day on the mountain, it was like a really, really long, hard trek. But so what our head guide would do is he'd point to the top of a hill and he'd be like, guys, come on, let's go there. And after like an hour or two of like some really, really crazy uphill, like hardcore trekking, we'd get to the top of the hill and our guide would just be like, okay, and then he'd point to the top of the next hill and we'd just be like, you're kidding. And like, there's no freaking way. And he did that like 3 or 4 times. But the point I'm trying to make is like, yeah, it was like an insane day, but the only way we were able to get there is kind of like one step at a time, one hill at a time, one break at a time. We got to our destination. So that was a lesson that Kili taught us for sure, that kind of like take every obstacle on one step at a time.
I mean, honestly, that's you're very lucky to have learned that lesson when you're all of 19, because I have to keep reminding myself that every day, and it really is. It's like that for anything you do in life. Whether it's your business or a trek or anything where it just sounds like this is exactly that mantra that it really is about taking life one step at a time and tackling each hurdle one at a time and not letting the whole sort of mountain consume you, I guess. So, that's amazing that you were able to experience that. And
I think
the value of that.
We're all so grateful for this, for like Kilimanjaro and for this gap year, because like, honestly, there's no way I'd have learned these kind of, life lessons, either in college or in school or, sitting in front of my computer studying like physics or something.
Sure. And so, I mean, what was the rest of the trek like? I mean, tell us.
So I mean, one step at a time, one day at a time, we finally make it to this base camp, which is the highest camp on the mountain.
Right.
And from that, everyone kind of makes their summit run.
Okay.
So the summit was probably okay, I'm gonna describe it. I mean, I kind of like get goosebumps every time I try to describe it. But what we were doing was we'd get to that base camp at around lunchtime. We'd quickly have our lunch and then we'd try to sleep as much as we can in the day.
Okay.
And we wake up at around 11 p.m. We eat a little bit, maybe like some porridge or like some kind of energy, just try to eat us a little bit. And then at around midnight or at around 12:30 in the morning, we would start trekking, because you can't start in the morning like we normally do every day when you're trying to get to the summit, because by the time you come down, it would be freezing cold and you'd be trekking down in the night.
So what's the duration, like the expected duration from the time you would start to the time you're expected to be back by, in terms of the number of hours?
Right. So we'd start around midnight and then we'd trek through the night until we reach kind of like, so Kilimanjaro is a volcano, right? It has a crater. So we reach the start of the crater we reached the start of the crater at sunrise. Right. Which is at this point called Stella Point, which was absolutely beautiful. It was some of the most beautiful sights that I've ever seen, like watching the sunrise
I'm sure.
at the summit of Kilimanjaro. And then we reached at around 7 in the morning to Stella Point. And from there, we walked for about another hour and a half or maybe another hour. And I think just at around 8 a.m., we reached the summit.
Wow. So you're talking about like a proper 8-hour trek just to get to the top.
Just to get to the top. And now we need to get back down, right? But the summit for me was these 6 hours of, 5 to 6 hours of trekking through the night, pitch dark. It's freezing cold where it's like minus 10 degrees. The wind is kind of pushing you back every step you take. You're wearing around 7 layers. So your shoulders are dying because of the load you're carrying. And you haven't slept in the day, right? You're trekking through the night. And we hadn't slept much in the day because it was so windy and we couldn't get that much sleep. So I was basically falling asleep while walking up. And it was honestly it was probably 5 or 6 hours of the hardest kind of thing that I've had to do physically. But the point I'm trying to make is that when we reached Stella Point and for that last hour of the summit walk, that was some of the most beautiful sights I'd ever seen, because we're trekking through the snow, we've just seen the sun rise over Kilimanjaro. We're literally trekking around the crater, so you can see the crater inside. And that was definitely some of the most beautiful and most satisfying, most enjoyable, that was the most enjoyable 1 hour I've spent. Even though I was like in unbearable pain, it was like all worth it. And I feel like now, or not now, but after coming down the mountain and like after spending a couple of days just like off the mountain, I kind of realized that like that's what life is, right? It's like the best things will only come after the hardest, after you push yourself the most, after you get out of your comfort zone the most. So once you're the most kind of like discomfortable, I feel like that's when you enjoy and you feel the most satisfied, you feel the most content after you've been through all the hardships that you've been through. So,
I mean, you're again, like I obviously, I haven't done something like Kili, but I relate to this so much with something that's a big part of my life right now, which is work. And, there's so many days where I just want to like give up. I just want to kind of get the hell out of this business. I'm like, I'm done with it. And this is like never ending. And then somehow you do come out on the other side. Everything's okay. And you just, and then when the next sort of like good thing happens, you're just like, wow, I hung in there and
for sure.
I went through that sort of nightmare, only to wake up and it was all good. And it sounds a lot like that.
I feel like at least for me, definitely wouldn't have felt as good if we hadn't just gone through what we had.
Right. Like if it comes too easy, it's not the same feeling of achievement.
Yeah. It's not worth it. Yeah. And like what you were saying, it's so true. Like during those 6 hours, I was giving up in my mind. Like, oh my God, every step I took, I was like, hell no, I'm not taking another step, and like I'd just stop, and some part of me would be like, you know what, just get there, just get through this and just get there. And it was so worth it. That's all I can say, that it was worth it.
But you were talking about this thing about your comfort zone and getting out of that. I mean, again, this is something that for adults, and as you get older, your comfort zone kind of gets more and more set in a way, right?
Yeah.
And it's harder to get out of those habits and those, that set ways of life. But, tell me a little more about how you were thinking about this, because it sounds like, everything that you've been doing, right up to this trek, whether it's your triathlon, which you hadn't done before, and, you said you hadn't done mountain biking, and of course, doing a summit for the first time and really pushing your body and your mind to the limits. Sounds like you really were out of your comfort zone. But
no, definitely that's so true. So,
but you felt so happy. So like, it just seems ironic that people resist getting out of their comfort zone, but actually that's what gives them this incredible sense of.
I think I read this somewhere actually, that your comfort zone doesn't have to be something that you don't enjoy. It's something that you're not used to doing, So honestly, the last...
You mean outside of your comfort zone?
Yeah, getting outside your comfort zone doesn't have to be something that you don't enjoy. So for the last 2 or 3 years, actually, honestly, for most of my life, all I've been doing is I've been sitting on my desk studying, or if I'm not studying, I'm kind of, like watching TV. I mean, basically, it's just a student life, where you're comfortable doing that. You're comfortable sitting at home, and
it's a norm. It's a kind of like...
I feel like, it's a norm. But what we weren't used to doing is kind of taking the leap and deciding to go to Africa and climb a mountain, or say go to Rishikesh and mountain bike while in the pouring rain, or like go to the Andamans and like kind of like learn how to scuba dive with strangers, right? So yes, kind of like even saying yes and taking that risk, I feel like for me was definitely outside of my comfort zone.
Okay.
And of course, doing those things was definitely outside of my comfort zone. And that's what this year has been about for me, just try to get as uncomfortable, my bad, uncomfortable.
Go back to school, Chet.
Uncomfortable as possible, and kind of break the negative connotations that the word discomfort has, because that's my favorite word right now. Like as of now in this year, that's my favorite word, discomfort, because that's the only way I feel like I'll ever grow.
Oh, it sounds like it kind of defines this year for you. And
Definitely, yeah.
and that's been the best thing. I mean, it's amazing. I really am trying to think about this so much where, you're so right, but it takes so much willpower. It takes a certain mindset to do it. And the most amazing thing is that, a lot of our discomfort comes from fear, right? Like fear of the
Absolutely,
unknown
yeah,
or
and just
whatever.
fear of getting outside of your comfort zone, fear of letting go of, your little bubble.
Of what you know, right?
Yeah,
And,
of what you know,
yeah.
of what you're comfortable with. Exactly.
Yeah. But that's where, from what you're saying, it sounds like that's actually where you're really living is outside of it. And what you're doing in your comfort zone is almost just getting by. But where you're actually living is probably outside of it.
Yeah, definitely. I read something else about your comfort zone, which is that your brain chemistry evolves and you feel the most alive when you're outside of your comfort zone. And that line was just so true for me because that was so true. That's what this year had been about. And I felt exactly that. I definitely felt the most alive, and I felt that I had learned so much just from kind of these experiences and traveling and kind of meeting people that I never otherwise would have met and experiencing different cultures. And yeah, all of that was outside my
boundaries.
Pushing your boundaries. And
well, I guess the lesson is to keep widening that zone, right? So
definitely.
But I have to digress slightly and tell you guys how my 40th birthday plans actually transpired, and in a large part thanks to Chait's gap year plans. So there was all this pressure to do something fun for my 40th and do something momentous. And while everyone was on their next flight to the Maldives, I decided I didn't want to be anywhere near where everyone was. So my sister and I actually have our birthdays a day apart, and we figured it would be nice to do something together somewhere. So Chet, you were going on this mountain triathlon near Rishikesh. And the next thing you know, you had all your aunts and cousins pile on and gate crash your trip. But, being back in the mountains, so I was actually, as you know, I was quite an avid trekker in my youth, in my younger days. I did a lot around Bombay where we'd go around Maharashtra, but then I also did a couple of treks to Nepal. I did this mountaineering course, this basic mountaineering course in Uttarkashi, which right now I have no idea how I got through that because I'm the least sort of athletic person. But I think it's kind of what you're saying where, you do it and it's almost like I didn't really know what I was getting myself into until I was there and it was too late and then you just got to do it. So, but it definitely is a great feeling to have done all these things, and seeing you, prepping for your triathlon reminded me so much of those days. And I have to say, I slightly envied you having this luxury of time to do all this now. And I want to talk to you about the idea of taking time off a little more. And, of course, it gets harder as you get older and you have more and more responsibilities and personal and financial commitments. But why do you think, having now taken a gap year and clearly loved every part of it, why do you think that more parents, especially Indian parents, and of course schools as well, don't proactively encourage their children to consider this as an option?
So that's definitely a valid question. And I honestly wouldn't know the reason, but I feel like, again, it kind of boils down to fear. And I think, like for me, for example, the biggest reason why I was hesitant in the first place to take the year off was, what am I going to do for a year? Like I've been studying for the last 12 years of my life. I've gone to school every day, and
that's all you know.
That's all I know, exactly. And if I take this year off and then go back to studying, I mean, is that going to affect my studies? I feel like, why would I want to take a year off from my education? I think that's what a lot of parents and a lot
so
of
I get that, I get that you may not have necessarily realized that the potential of this route, taking this route, but surely, parents who older, wiser, have seen, have experienced so much more, and schools, of course, who, which are in the business of kind of, giving amazing opportunities to students to develop them, etc., educate them. You would think that, they would have a different perspective on life, and, the fact that, education is sort of ongoing. It's always there, as an option. And you would think that they would actually see the value in doing something like this. So it really baffles me, honestly, as to why. I mean, I don't expect everyone to take a gap year. Everyone's got different goals.
No, definitely. For sure.
But I do question why it's not even something that's more on the radar. I mean, what happened last year for you happened because of a situation you found yourself in, or like students in your year found themselves in because of the pandemic. But if that hadn't happened, it just seems like now listening to you and what you've been through, and like I mentioned, what I've seen happen well over 20 years ago when I went to college and saw so many kids doing it. It just I wonder why it's not more prevalent in India. And is this something that needs to change?
That's so true. And that's what's really interesting for me as well, because, if it wasn't for this pandemic, I definitely wouldn't have taken a gap year. That just baffles me. And I can't really explain that, because, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that I'm so grateful to COVID-19 and...
Said no one ever.
But at least it's a silver lining. And,
of course.
But I feel like another reason why it is rare for kids to be encouraged, I mean, especially in India, to take a gap year is maybe because it's just how what the norm is over here, on what the normal definition of success is, what the normal definition of what a successful student is, or what you would want for your child or for your student if you're a school. Is right. I feel like it's to kind of get done with school, get done with college, and then get a good job, right? And then, or maybe it's about money, or maybe it's about how much you earn, right? But everyone has their own definitions of what success is, and everyone wants the best for their kids and wants the best for their students. And there's definitely nothing wrong with that. That's amazing, right?
Sure.
To want what's best for your child. But I think that's why I think taking a gap year kind of is not the most holistic and efficient way to achieve what you believe in, is success, right? But in that sense, maybe that's one possibility as to why it's not as common in India. And that's kind of related to the fear, right? That's kind of related to, if I'm not going to achieve that in the most efficient way, then what am I going to do?
Right.
So,
but maybe it's time that we sort of start rethinking those definitions and that mindset. So, if you had to rewind and you weren't in the middle of a pandemic, would you still take a gap year knowing what you know today? I think I know the answer, but I'll let you answer this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Knowing what I know today, if I had to go back a year and be asked this question, do you want to take a gap year? I would hands down say yes. But like I said, what's interesting is that if I didn't know what I know today and I just look back at me
and there was no
pandemic, I probably wouldn't, I definitely wouldn't have taken a gap year. Because honestly, say 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I was the last person to want to take a gap year. And
you're pretty clear, like you're pretty sort of clear about what you want to do, and you're looking forward to college, which is what most students, right? Yeah. Exactly. Like most sort of people after high school, it's like, oh, now I'm getting away from home, and you can't wait for that to happen. And so, of course, for those who are going to be, going outside the city of where they live, they literally can't wait. So I guess it's a bunch of factors, but that was one of the reasons for me having you on the show today, was just to hopefully get people to think about this, because it really sounds like there was so much incredible learning for you, not just from the literal sense of the things you did, but just so much to take away. And hopefully, I'm pretty sure these experiences are going to stay with you for a very, very long time. And what more could you ask for? So we're going to take a quick break before we get into our rapid fire, which is the fun bit where I ask you all the things that are not related to your gap year. So we'll be back in a few minutes.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank the sponsor on the network this week, Credensia. Thank you so much for making this possible. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus was joined by actress Shreya Pilgaonkar to talk about her career in acting. On Begin the Journey, Ashish Vidyarthi lists down the modern concepts of friendship and how one can choose the right friend circle in life on Begin the Journey. On The Habit Coach, Ashton Doctor was joined by Aisha Bilamoria to talk about running and developing an athletic mentality. Farhad and Sunithra are joined by LGBTQ workplace advocate Suresh Ramdas to discuss the new normal in queer relationships on KBCD. On Tere Mere Raaste, Keshav Chaturvedi takes us to the riverbanks of Banaras and describes the soulful mornings to us. And finally, on the Positively Unlimited podcast, Chaitanya Chakravarti takes the fear out of the word responsibility. And with that, let's get you back to your show.
So welcome back to This Round is on Me, where I have with me my nephew, Chaitanya Motwane, who's just been sharing these incredible stories of his gap year. And boy, it makes me want to rewind my life 20 years and take off as well. But here we are instead doing our rapid fire. So Chet, here are a bunch of questions. Just say the first thing that comes to your mind. As a restaurateur, I always ask this, what's your favorite comfort food?
Rolls.
Yes, we've heard about your 3 a.m. rolls. So
Definitely. Frankies or rolls for sure. Definitely.
like every teenager. A good book you've read recently. Have you even had a chance to read in all of this adventure travel?
But definitely Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari is just a mind-boggling book. And honestly, I don't read that much at all. But of the few books that I've read in the last 1 or 2 years, this is definitely the best and the most recent.
Amazing. Any role models or mentors that you've had a chance to develop in your 19 years of life?
Oh God.
Well, you don't, if you haven't, that's totally cool, but just curious. I don't tend to have many 19-year-olds on the show very often, so I'm intrigued to get into your head.
For a role model, I don't know. I'm sorry, this fully defeats the purpose of rapid fire. But,
No, not very rapid. No, but listen, that's totally cool. Like, if there isn't someone who's, and hey, you've got a long, long life ahead of you and lots of time to, develop role models and mentors, which you will no doubt have in your life. But that's totally cool. So tell me something, I've been hearing so much about all the amazing stuff you've done in the last year. Tell me something that hasn't gone so well in this gap year.
Wow, yeah. So obviously the pandemic has
played havoc.
Yeah, definitely played havoc in a lot of my trips. Like, for example, actually our first trip to Kili got cancelled and I was supposed to go to the Andamans after Kili, but I just kind of figured that, I straight took the next flight out of the Andamans and I preponed my Andamans trip to before. But yeah, something that hasn't gone well is, trips getting cancelled, plans getting cancelled, the lockdown, me not having the liberty to travel as much. And, definitely when I'm not traveling, when I'm not kind of like out there, this year it has definitely been hard in the sense that you do kind of have to figure out a way to keep yourself occupied. When I'm sitting at home, I do need to figure out what to do. If I'm not planning the next trip or I'm not training for it, that has definitely been challenging for me.
Mm-hmm. But it's a great, it's really a good sort of skill to have, almost life skill to have, because you're not always going to have entertainment at your fingertips. Trust me, things are going to go not to plan, more than once. So learning how to deal with that disappointment and being able to adapt and sort of, realign and, deal with detours is a great life skill to have. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, another thing for me to thank the pandemic for.
True, very true. Last but not the least, what's your advice to adults or parents?
Oh, wow. Okay, so obviously, like my advice to adults or parents was, so by the way, my mother was fully and completely supportive of me taking this gap year and kind of, traveling as much as I did. And but my advice to adults would definitely be to kind of not just let your child get out of their comfort zone more, but you guys as well. Because I feel like it's a lot easier for adults in their whole life, which like kind of revolves around them, their jobs, etc., to kind of not to be in that bubble and work in that bubble and that isolated kind of system, but every now and then kind of get out there and get out of your comfort zone. And it doesn't have to be an adventure. It doesn't have to be go trekking. It can just be something that, basically take the leap. I think the best advice that I was given, not given, but I feel like the best lesson that I learned this year was to just say yes to everything. And I feel like, to sum it up, I feel like the best advice that I could give to adults and to anyone is to just really say yes, because that's what I've learned and that's what I know. And that's what has made this year so amazing for me.
Chet, I can't tell you how lucky you are to have taken this gap year, not just for the adventures you had literally, but like I said, for the life lessons you've clearly taken away from these adventures. And I'm so happy to see that you've been able to reflect and realize these lessons, because honestly, they will stay with you forever and hold you in good stead as adulthood takes over. So I'm really proud of you and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Thanks so much.
To be honest, I really wish I had more courage to live life on my own terms and not what society expects of me, and take that time off when I need it. I fully appreciate that this pandemic has been a disaster in many respects. But it has equally forced me to review and reconsider so many routines and to feel less guilty about my choices. And for that, I'm really grateful. Perhaps our greatest adventure lies in not following the norm, but taking that plunge we've been thinking about so much, but have just been too nervous to do. I hope Chaitanya's gap year gave you just the right dose of inspiration. I hope you enjoyed tuning in today. Do catch the earlier episodes when you get a chance. And more importantly, I would love to hear from you with your thoughts on the show. You can find me on Instagram at Gauri Devidayal or on Twitter at Gauri Details or LinkedIn. Either way, sit back and relax because this round is on me.
Come learn and experience the ABCDs of being queer with me, Shunetro,
and me, Farhad,
on our show, Gay BCD.
The two of us take you through our stories and experiences of being gay men in the city of Mumbai and have candid
and sometimes downright scandalous
conversations about sexuality, gay culture, and everything in between.
Catch new episodes of Gay BCD every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get all your podcasts from.
We live in an age of disruption, of immense change in every aspect of work, life, and business. But is the old way of doing things truly dead? And are we ever going to stop saying the new normal? Join me, Varun Dugirala, on Advertising is Dead every Tuesday as I talk to entrepreneurs, leaders, creators, and change makers from across business, media, marketing, and beyond to dig a little deeper into how we got here, what we're doing now, and where we're headed. You can catch all the episodes of Advertising is Dead on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from.